Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. EQA Nostalgia here, and today I want to go back into the past a little bit. I want to talk about Socom Confrontation. But before I really get into this, I just want everybody to know that I didn't know too much about Confrontation. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be saying is just things that I've heard from the community, members of the real Socom, and things that I've talked to them about. So I can't really speak from experience about how it was back when the game first came out. I had absolutely no interest in it at all when it first came out, and that was mostly because I was just really depressed after my cousin passed away. The last SOCOM game he and I played together was SOCOM 3. After that, I got Combined Assault, but it wasn't really the same. This is stuff that I've mentioned before, so if you've already heard that, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go over it again. It just wasn't the same without him, so for me, that fire, that SOCOM fire, kind of died off for a while there. And then slowly I started to come back around and started having feelings of nostalgia and really wanted to kind of get back in there and rekindle those flames. And I have to give some credit to H-Hour because I think H-Hour is what did that really. Once I heard about H-Hour, it just kind of pulled me in. It kind of shook me a little bit because I knew that SOCOM 4 was a complete disaster. I knew that Confrontation had let people down. But H-Hour, once I heard David Sears was going to be like heading that up, I really started to invest myself into that, and I got passionate about it again. But after PS2, and I was a holdout with PS2, I stuck with it a lot longer than most people did. I was playing PlayStation 2 well into the PlayStation 3's life cycle in 360. It took one of my buddies to get me, actually a couple of my friends, to get me over to 360. They were all playing on there, and they just kept busting my balls, saying, "Dude, you can't keep like playing EverQuest Online Adventures and Resident Evil Outbreak and shit like that." I think towards the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle for me, anyways, I was playing a lot of Resident Evil Outbreak, and I just wasn't ready to move on. I didn't really feel the need to move on, but I did. I moved over to 360. And I had pretty much no interest at all in PlayStation 3. The only thing that PlayStation 3 had that I wanted, that I kind of wanted, was Confrontation. But I had read reviews and I had heard from other people that it was just a mess. In fact, one of my buddies brought it over. It was like Christmas night. He brought over his PlayStation 3, hooked it up, and I played like one round of Crossroads. It didn't feel right. It was just fucked up. And that kind of cemented it right there. I just said, I'm never going to get this. But then, like I said, H-Hour came around, and I started getting interested more in SOCOM. I started thinking more about it. And then I heard that they were going to be shutting down Confrontation and shutting down SOCOM 4. So what I did is I ran out, I bought myself a PlayStation 3, and I bought myself a copy of Confrontation and SOCOM 4. And then I paid like $5 for SOCOM 4 and like $1.50 for Confrontation. They were cheap. I mean, they were, I don't know if they were recently marked down because they were going to be getting shut down or whatever, but they were cheap. And Confrontation, I really enjoyed it. I was surprised by this because I remember watching Suck My Turban's videos going, wow, that looks fucking terrible, But I got in and I played it and I had a lot of fun. And I just kept thinking to myself, why was this such a disaster? And then I just deduced that, I must have had a horrible lunch. And that's what I had heard. People had confirmed that it was so bad you couldn't even log in. Like, people were getting kicked and there were all sorts of issues. And instead of working on new maps for like the first 9 months of the game's life cycle, which is something they really needed to do, they didn't have a whole hell of a lot of maps. SOCOM 2 had like 20 plus maps. Confrontation only had a few of them. And instead of working on those maps, they had to work on the bugs and they had to work on patching it and just getting it to be playable. And I have to say real quick, I am paraphrasing off of Ditch, a user from the real SOCOM. So shout out to him. He's dropped this information just recently because I was asking about it. And then they came out with the Cold Front DLC. And I don't think that did really well. I wanted to get it, but it was kind of pointless. I mean, it had Vigilance, and I believe it had Blizzard. I can't remember all the maps it had, but I was interested in getting it because I love Vigilance. I was a really big fan of that in Blizzard, and I always liked snow. Like any kind of like snow maps, it's just something with me. It's weird. I like to play games that have snow and snowy areas. I've always liked that shit. And I wanted to get it, but there was no way I was going to pay money. And I don't even remember how much it cost. There was no way I was going to pay money to play it just to have it shut down. I mean, if it had some sort of LAN support and we could play it on X-Link, then fine, that wouldn't have been a big deal. I would have grabbed it up while I had the chance, but it just wasn't. It wasn't the case. It wasn't meant to be. I didn't get to play those maps, and it bums me out. And to this day, I've still got regret that I didn't get into it, and I didn't play it as much as I could have, because I had a lot of fun with that game, man. Now I love the Socom Insurgency mod. I'm playing it. I'm probably gonna have it up on the screen now. It's probably what you guys are looking at, but it's not the same, you know. I think the main issue I have with Insurgency, and I don't want to take anything away from it. It's an awesome mod. It's the closest you can get to SOCOM right now. But I think the main problem for me is I just wish they would speed up the strafing, and I wish they would just give you more like HP, more life, so that you don't get destroyed with like a couple of bullets. Because I did like a little bit of strafing and a little bit of a gunfight. In Insurgency, you don't have that at all. And I don't really think that Confrontation really had much of that either. But I do remember at least some of it. And one of the things I really didn't like about Confrontation was the sprint button, the run button. Insurgency has that as well, and I wish they would just take that out of there and just make the sprint speed the usual normal running speed. But I don't know. It's not my mod, you know. I can't I can't change those things, but it is a really good mod. I highly recommend it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, but I think that Confrontation was just a game that, man, they just didn't have enough funding, you know, and they didn't have enough time. And I see kind of like the same thing has been happening with H-Hour, aside from the whole PR disaster, the way they have treated the community. Let's just put that aside and say that didn't happen. Like, just hypothetically, let's say that didn't happen. The main problem with H-Hour was it was just kind of mismanaged, you know. They wanted to get money to get money, which just doesn't make any fucking sense. But I think if they would have came out sooner and built the game off of what they had, they might have had a better chance. But really, to be fair towards H-Hour, they didn't secure a lot of funding for making games. Making a game is expensive, but it's just the way it is. And you can point and say, look what they did with the mods. You know, look what Redline has done pretty much by himself. But that engine was already pretty much done, and everything was, you know, he just had to kind of go in there and tweak things. He wasn't really building it from the ground up like H-Hour, but I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken. What the fuck do I know? I don't create games, I don't know shit. But yeah, they didn't have a lot of money with H-Hour. They didn't have a lot of money with Confrontation, and from what I heard, they didn't have a lot of time to get it out there. And that's a serious misstep on Sony's behalf. It seems to me like they just didn't treat it seriously enough. Because SOCOM 1, 2, and 3 were huge. 3 started to drop down in sales. It wasn't that big. And then Combined Assault probably didn't get a whole hell of a lot of sales. It was mostly like a DLC pack, if you were to compare it to now. But yeah, it just really sucks. I wish they would have got behind it more. I wish they would have funded it, gave them more time so they could have made more maps. And studios, you know, when they're working on a game, it's not completely up to them. The publisher and whoever's funding the project, they have the final say. So a lot of times you'll see that. And we saw that with Vanguard, a game that Brad McQuaid made, like the spiritual successor to EverQuest. You know, that game was rushed out the gate. They didn't have a lot of time, they didn't have a lot of funding, and it was a buggy mess. But it was a great game after a while. And that game failed. And that happens with so many games, and it's so fucking disappointing. Because given enough time and given enough funding, Confrontation could have been really, really great. Those initial impressions are a bitch. And I've said this before in my previous video, H-Hour, I think they have at least a little bit more of a chance because early access, it's understood that early access is going to be kind of shitty. Back when PlayStation 3 was a thing, you had one shot and that was it. You were we're fucked. I mean, maybe H-Hour is completely fucked. Maybe it's too late. The damage is done. But it's not like they released it on PlayStation 4. It was a buggy mess. It was a piece of shit, and they had to patch it for months and months and months. They've got like a second shot. At least it seems that way. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I just wanted to put that out there, and I wanted to express my regret for never really getting to play Confrontation as much as I should have. And I did enjoy it. I thought it was pretty fun. And it did have issues. It wasn't as great as SOCOM 2, but I enjoyed it. And I really do wish that there were LAN servers so I could play it, because I'd probably be playing that more than anything else right now. And SOCOM 4, I got a review for that. I'll put a link in the description, or I might even put it up on the screen at the end of the video, so you can just click on it. That game was a fucking wreck. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope you guys will take the time to leave a like, because there will be more of these videos. I want people to see them. I thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.
Gotta keep it down, there's Charlie everywhere.